All right, astute researchers. I can't even speak. Um, this video, actually, it's 6, not 5. Pretend that I changed that, right? This is the video about frequency, association, and causal, 3 different study designs. So this is one of the crucial things that you'll learn in this semester is a study frequency, association, or causal. That question will be something that you answer throughout the entire semester, including on the final. So keep this in mind. There are 3 types of study designs. Let's talk about each one. The first one we're going to talk about is frequency. So the frequency design is pretty simple. What you're doing is you're finding out things that will help you better understand or describe a group. And you're only looking at one variable. Or you could be looking at a bunch of different variables in a study, but those variables are not connected. We're just looking at kind of a way of better describing a group. And so you might want to look at something like their rate of depression. So if we want to better describe a group of students, we might say, what is the rate of depression in these students? Or you might say, well, here are a bunch of students. How much lettuce do they eat? Do they eat a lot of lettuce in the summer? How much lettuce do they eat in the winter? And we're looking at 2 levels of lettuce being eaten. How much lettuce is eaten in the summer? How much lettuce is eaten in the winter? Now, if we are comparing those two and we say, how much lettuce do they eat and does it change in the summer or the winter? We're actually doing a little more complicated than just a simple frequency. We're looking at 2 frequencies. You could say the frequency of lettuce eaten in the summer and the frequency of lettuce eaten in the winter. But once we compare those, then we're looking at an association. And so I included this because a lot of times people get confused about this. If we're just looking at lettuce eaten in the summer, that's one data point. Lettuce eaten in the winter, that's another data point. If we're going to compare, is there a difference between summer and winter? Then we're looking at 2 variables. We're looking at season and we're looking at lettuce eating behaviors. So that would be an association, which is going to be the next time. How many hours do you study on Wednesdays? That's a frequency. That is one variable we're looking at. How many hours do you study? And we're looking at a slice of time on Wednesdays. Again, once you start comparing hours studied on Wednesdays versus hours studying on Saturdays, then you're looking at 2 variables, day of the week plus hours studied. That would then be an association study. And so right here, we're just looking at number of hours studied on Wednesday. That's a frequency. How many times per month do you vacuum your room? Frequency. That one's really a simple one. Okay, association. With association, this is really kind of more what we think about in terms of looking at a study. People want to see how are things related to each other. Does one variable change based on whether or not the other variable changes? So, for example, in the previous slide, we talked about studying and day of the week. Do you tend to study more on Wednesdays than you do on Saturdays? So there's some relationship between amount of studying and day of the week. So here are some examples. Can I predict how many vegetables you eat based on where you're from? 2 variables, number of vegetables you eat and where you're from. So we're connecting those 2. Do employers prefer confident women versus women who are unsure? So we have 2 variables. Employer preference is one variable, and confidence of the women is the other variable. Next one, if you're depressed, are you more likely to sleep or exercise? So you can see we're looking at more than one variable and the association between them. And finally, is the number of times you vacuum your room per month related to whether you prefer to play Tetris or Call of Duty? Tell me what you think. Which one? And wouldn't that be I don't know, maybe it'd be a boring study. Maybe it'd be an interesting study. You choose. Causal studies are kind of what we think of as the true experiments when it comes to science. When you think about, I'm going to do some science, a lot of times people imagine you're going to do a causal study. In a causal study, you manipulate a variable. So we talked a fair amount in the last video about what that means, manipulating a variable. One group gets like maybe the active variable or a particular level of the variable, and the other group doesn't get that same level. So you're changing how much of a variable each group gets. So you're manipulating that variable and you see the difference that the variable makes in the study. Does one variable make the other variable happen? So for example, does lettuce eating reduce depression in vacuum happy students? So you can imagine, what kind of groups do you have to set up then? You need some students that are not vacuum happy, and you need some students who are vacuum happy. And maybe they all need to be depressed, although how you can be depressed and vacuum happy, that might be a little tricky. And then you have to see if lettuce eating makes a difference in their level of depression. So you might look at just only vacuum happy students who are depressed, and see if eating lettuce makes a difference. Confusing, but kind of and goofy, yes. But that's sort of the idea behind a study, an experiment. So think about this one. Which variable would you manipulate? Will asking confident women to stop studying on Wednesdays result in higher employer satisfaction? So what are you manipulating in that study? Give it a thought. And so the answer, I think, is you're asking them to either study on Wednesdays or not study on Wednesdays. And then you're measuring employer satisfaction. And so you're going to see if all your confident women who studied on Wednesday are different than all the confident women who didn't study, who stopped studying on Wednesdays in terms of their employer satisfaction. Okay, sum up. Frequency studies really are looking at one variable. You could have one study that looks at a bunch of different variables. You could call it a lot of frequency studies all put together in one, but those are frequency studies when you're not comparing the variables to each other. Once you start relating variables, then you've hit association studies. So relating how two variables are related is an association. A causal study will say that the variable manipulation will change the outcome, and you can change it with causality. Association, the difference there is you're not really sure which one is the one that's changing. You can't really say A comes before B or B comes before A. All you know is that there's some relationship. The nature of the relationship, you don't know. So for example, depression and sleep. For a long time, we knew that people who were depressed also didn't sleep well, but we weren't sure which direction the relationship was in. Maybe depression made people sleep poorly. Maybe sleeping poorly made people depressed. And so it was an association, but there was no causality that we knew of yet. Then, with a ton of data, what people determined was that sleep really can cause depression. So, not getting enough sleep is seen to be causal in creating depression. We could say poor sleep can come first and create depression. Depression, of course, also can create poor sleep, but we do know that sleep is causal in depression. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks much.